we're going to start with the other game, which features our own vested interests. This is Italy versus Ireland. It's going to be Saturday, February 27th. This Saturday, obviously. 3:15 local time kickoff. That's 2:15 GMT. That's going to be in Stadio Olimpico in Rome. And reffed by Mathieu Reynal, Frenchman, with the man in the whistle. Just the weather, as we looked at it a few days out, the weather's set to be another delightful day for running rugby in Italy. 17 to 20 degrees, bit of sunshine, little to no wind. This is ideal for a lot of teams. Hopefully Ireland can play some rugby. It's ideal.
Great to see. In some games, it's usually the case in Italy, but great to see the weather not be a huge factor on what goes on and not play this sort of winter rugby. And I don't think we're going to have that in any of the games this week, which is exciting.
That's good to hear.
I think both teams will be happy with this nice bit of.
It's perfect weather. There's no complaints about it.
No,
it was too sunny.
Ireland are in a position where they want it to rain, and despite Italy being potentially the weaker team. They're not in a position where they want it to rain.
No, they want to go wide.
Yeah,
exactly. So it just rain makes everything much tougher, regardless of what game you're playing. Sure, even we're talking about Georgia, don't particularly love the rain, even though you'd think that they're a big, muscular, kind of narrow team, but it's still the ball squirts out like a bar of soap when it's wet. So it's tough, Totally. Nothing of the sort here in Rome, as you'd expect. It's going to be a sunshiny day, and hopefully a nice curtain raiser. It is. Speaking of colour, it is the Italy game has just served as the curtain raiser in each of the weeks. It feels like they're doing that. It's kind of the right thing to do. Obviously, in normal circumstances, you don't want to have like Ireland had 2 Sunday games in a row in the first 2 weeks. That would have been highly controversial if it were not a COVID year. If people for fan reasons,
they're doing the scheduling wisely for TV reasons.
Exactly.
And this one, the Italy game being the curtain raiser, plays off quite well, especially with the fact that they're an hour ahead of the home nations as well, which makes it make even more sense.
Yes, indeed.
It's the game between the only 2 sides in the competition yet to notch up a victory.
Somebody's has got to go, unless it's a draw, I guess.
It's definitely got stakes to it, in spite of being such a dead rubber seemingly between 2 sides who aren't going to win the competition. For both sides, this game feels like it has stakes. I mean, for Italy, this fixture represents, I think, the best chance they'll have for a win this year. It's Franco Smith and his troops now, they're going to have to bring a good performance to beat Ireland. They're going to have to be sort of their very, very best, most disciplined, composed, and then
accurate and clinical.
Look to heap some scoreboard pressure on Ireland and put them in an uncomfortable position, and question their confidence and question they're a side without momentum. So if Italy can start well, they'll feel they have a great chance. I feel like Ireland, despite losing the first 2 weeks, they're not too far away from the top 5 teams. Or the top 4 teams ahead of them. At the moment, obviously, they're 0-2, but they've yet to play Scotland, they've yet to play England. They could easily notch up a win there. They're not as far away as all that in terms of player quality.
No, the calibre of the tournament is such that they've been a few degrees off with their offence and their defence, and that's the difference. It's been 1-score games each way, but they've missed out on both occasions. So
But the thing that's been true, I think, the whole time is that the gap between 1 and 5 in the Six Nations is very rarely as large as the gap between 5 and 6.
Yes,
and I think this serves as a great bellwether kind of game from Italian point of view, in terms of just how far you are from the gap. This is the most out of form team in the Six Nations, the most vulnerable team in the Six Nations. You've got them at home,
most blunt probably team.
In
terms of scoreboard pressure of their own.
You've got them at home. Obviously you don't have fans, but you've got that advantage going for you. You're going to be playing in perfect conditions. You've got more or less a full squad to choose from. How close can you come to notching up a win? And I think it's going to be a decent test in that way. In recent times, they've not come up with anything in these kinds of tests, but I think there's a feeling generally that they might be close to emerging as more competitive.
More competitive. They've scored 3 tries to Ireland's 2 so far in the comp. That's positive for them. It's not usually that the case after 2 weeks. They've strung a few more things together. They have found a nice young new halfback combination that's going to be the source of lots of Italian optimism as well.
They're moving the ball crisply.
They're taking nice tries, scoring some points, being in games for periods. They're still. Some game management is letting them down. Scoreboard pressure. They still have failed to score at least 20 points, which I think they're going to need to if they're going to win any of these games. But I think, Franco Smith's fingerprints are all over the team, and it's been growing pretty steadily. And even going into the World Cup, we were saying they were growing under Conor O'Shea, and they just didn't really have the chance to show that because they were so much better than the other two teams below them in their group, and so much worse than.
Yeah, they hadn't grown to the point of view of being at all competitive against an All Blacks or a Springboks.
No, indeed. So,
but this game against Ireland is arguably the best chance they've had in recent times to really set out their stall as competitive.
Yeah.
And apart from maybe the Wales game last year, which they flopped in twice, so those omens are bad for them. But whether they're building or not, whether Garbisi is going to emerge as one of the best 10s out there and be potentially a guy who can steer this team to the top level, I think is going to be revealed to some extent in this game.
Yes, indeed.
From an Irish point of view, going into this week, the confidence is not going to be great. I mean, it's certainly over here. It feels very negative. The coverage around this team, obviously, just the consistent fall from 2018 standards of imagining ourselves being the best in the world to imagining ourselves being top 4 in the world to imagining ourselves being top 8 in the world, top half of the Six Nations maybe, and the fall has just continued, and it's on the squad to book the trend at some point. It's on the team to book the trend at some point or not.
Yeah.
And the question is this going to be a turning around moment? Is this going to be maybe a slight reprieve from the usual sort of decline? Or maybe the beginning of something. It could have been.
Well, it's a similar equation to what England had with the Italy game as well, where it's like, the first 2 weeks as opposed to the first week hasn't gone your way. You need to rediscover some form with ball in hand. You need to kind of reinvent yourselves in terms of your attack. You need to just gain a bit of confidence, a bit of momentum. All of that is possible for Ireland in this fixture, and should be what they're aiming to do. It's interesting what'll be interesting to see is just how they approach it, because it's similar to England. I think they can probably win this game one of many ways, but what way they'll choose to will be kind of revealing of where their state of mind is.
We'll get into the squads now in a moment, but it's an interesting one. Like I think they're going to take it seriously. I think they're going to try and play their best game. But the question is whether they're going to add layers to their game as well as doing that. And the other question is whether they're going to play well enough to win the game, because you need a good offense. You need to marry the two. Building the offense and working on the game and playing well are not at odds with each other.
No,
at all.
Yeah, indeed.
And Ireland are going to need that.
Yes, that's exactly right. And they've shown some frailties on attack and defence so far, as well as just a general kind of low ebb. So all of that needs to be corrected. Just in terms of squads then, we'll move on to Italy. They had injury concerns going into the tournament with a few key marquee men missing, and they still have been mounting some of that, but it's good to see a few people still in there, like Maximum Banda, Johan Meyer and Negri, all cleared to play. Obviously they were without their usual Pelledri and Stain. We mentioned that's been pre-tournament. They're go-to two guys, but they do have depth in that particular area.
They've been the injuries at the back row have definitely hurt them in recent weeks. They've kind of been mounting. You saw towards the tail end of the England game where they really did struggle to cope with England, and that usual physicality that you would have associated with them with Stain, Pelledri and Negri in and around the fringes was diminished. Yeah. And that was in part due to the fact that I think Meyer went off and I think Mbanda went off, and it looked to struggle out there. It's
an attritional game. If you're going to play the game as a back rower for Italy, it's a very attritional way to play the game. They do a lot of work.
They do a huge job for them, and that's like having those three back, hopefully fit to play, is going to be huge for them. Marco Zanon also back.
That is great.
In the outside centre jersey.
Centre.
Creates an interesting dynamic. Obviously, we don't have the team as of right now, but it creates an interesting dynamic as to whether they stick with Garbisi Kana, which I think they should, and leave Brex for this game. Or whether they keep Brex in there and maybe try and unleash Canna off the bench. Those options are open to
Allen,
them.
who they brought in off the bench at fullback. He's a potential 12 as well. There's all kinds of options for them now in the back line.
I suspect and would hope that Garbisi, Canna and Zanon is the first pick. I just think that is the best balance to it from an offensive point of view, because they all bring different things and they're all kind of needed. Garbisi doesn't have the boot to play without Canna for me. Canna doesn't have the distribution ability of Garbisi, and Zanon's just a great runner of the ball. He's a real offensive weapon in the way that the other two guys aren't, so it just balances out that midfield nicely, and creates just a dangerous dynamic in that Italian team. So there's excitement,
scope to get wide, which they've been looking to do as well. Anything else on squad for them? I don't think.
Well, big Sheriff Traore is back at loose head,
right.
but they're going to have more or less the same team. Traore might come in at loose head and try and buckle down that scrum. Either way, it's going to be a big job for the props.
Yes, indeed.
From an Irish point of view, we actually are in a nice position where just as we've come on, the Independent over here seems to have leaked a probable team.
Yes,
so we've an idea.
Nice.
We've an idea of how they're going to go. Probably, there could also be one or two changes from this, but it seems likely that they're going to go with more or less the big guys. And interestingly, a full Leinster backline of Gibson Park, Sexton back in, Henshaw, Ringrose, and Larmer, Lowe, and Keenan in the back three.
Yeah.
Tyke Byrne moving to the back row with partnering Josh in the flank, CJ staying at 8, Ian Henderson and James Ryan coming back in. And then Kilcoyne, Kelleher and Furlong, who were the three replacements last time out, week. Are apparently going to start this week, but they could chop and change that.
That will be Kelleher's first Six Nations start, should it come to pass, which should be good enough for him. And
first start after a first try is a good one.
Yeah, that's why he's been brilliant off the bench in both games, to be honest. So it's well deserved.
But yeah,
a few grievances, obviously, a few issues with it. I still don't understand why, if you're switching Byrne to the back row, you're not putting him at 8.
Him at 8 and CJ at 6
makes all the sense in the world.
Ruddock will feel harshly left out.
Ruddock is very he'd be on the bench,
but that is a harsh one. And obviously, they're not going for the sort of youthful change. They're going for the same team. Mm-hmm. I don't really think personnel issues are that much of a problem for them. I more want to see a difference in shape in the back line, like a bit of shape to help the players attack, and then more of an attacking emphasis in terms of how they want to move the ball, better support play, etc., getting offloads away, trying to move defences around, trying to strike off set piece,
to look for space with ball in hand.
Look for space and trying to attack off one another. There's too much
kick into it,
or even there's too much when they're trying to move the ball of one guy getting it and then doing a bit of hustle work. You need guys combining with one another and picking lines off each other, and that's the bigger deal for Ireland. One of the fears that you could have with this team is that they're just picking the Leinster backline and going, "Go be Leinster, you go be Leinster like you do in the pro." Like, they need much more help than that in my mind.
Well, sure. But it's a entire point, but like, Leinster don't run without shape. All the provinces run with shape and with a plan. You can't just have a straight back line and just give the guy the ball and hope he hustles his way into an open space, which seems to be the plan thus far, but hopefully not this time. But we will park that squad updates and just go into the preview of each side and what their winning conditions should be, should they look to go and win it. And we're going to start with the host, which are Italy. Just in terms of their attack, it's a crucial factor. It's kind of determinative as far as how the game's going to go for them. They set the template really well last week, or not last week, 2 weeks ago, with that great early try against England in Twickenham. That's really how the games have to start for them. I think they're so outgunned and outmatched overall against these top teams that they need to be really, really accurate and sharp when they have the ball. But there's scope for optimism because they found that try against what is a top and fearsome defence with really good attacking rugby and good, quick, accurate play. And Ireland have shown vulnerability and a bit of softness, especially off set piece and especially off wide manoeuvres. So this kind of suits, on paper, it suits what Italy are trying to do with ball in hand.
It does. And the first couple of weeks they had some noticeable success. I see, even against France, I thought they moved the ball really well, and that's against a tough Edwards defence who really gave them nothing and were brilliant the whole game, and kind of demoralised them at times with just key moments and key turnovers, which is what Ireland will look to do. But the Irish defence, a lot is made of their attack, given their phenomenal possession stats for limited try-scoring return.
Which is obviously a concern.
And then the other side of the coin is that they have all of this possession. They're giving the opponents no possession and still conceding a rakeload of tries. And from an Italian point of view, I mean, the French have really exposed it. I think on a couple of occasions they've exposed just a real flaw in the Irish shape again. It's very sort of haphazard and off a line out, as you say. If they can move the ball as France did in both games where they played Ireland recently, move the ball if you have a left field line out, move the ball to the right wing in a couple of phases, and then flash it across back to the left wing where you have a couple of in one phase, or even two quick phases, and you have a couple of backs over there. Very often in the Irish shape, you're seeing them paired up against tight forwards, props, and scrum halves. Like if last week it was Gibson Park and Keane Healy, I think.
Yeah.
And then a couple of times in the game in Paris, it was Andrew Porter out in those wide channels, off a defensive line out. Ireland get pulled to one side, Henshaw and Ringrose like around the ruck, and then back across the other side. There's only tight forwards. Yeah. And Italy, you need to be identifying that. Garbisi is quite good at moving this offense around and picking them, plugging them in the right holes. Canna very good at finding the open field.
They have a nice shape to them, and just in general in open play, their shape and structure is nice and deep and nice and wide, and they have kind of big forward carriers out in the wide channels. It's just a question of identifying that. It needs to be part of the plan, and then accuracy. It needs to be accuracy of passing, because what we've seen against top teams is that they've got to like the second last pass, or they've got 3 or 4 passes across the line, but like the last 2 of them are a little bit clunky either side, and then the guy who's meant to be fixing and giving is getting man and ball tackled, and he's way behind the gain line, and that's obviously going to stymie you.
One negative phase as the game goes on. I mean, I think tactically speaking, the early goings do demand scoreboard pressure.
Oh, it has to be.
And I think especially early doors against this Ireland team, who are not great with great in terms of momentum. But if Ireland get a score up, or if Ireland build themselves into the game, they're going to become very, very difficult to play against, as they sort of get their tails between their heads and their big forward pack gets rumbling.
Tails between their heads. Tails between their legs.
That's not even the right phrase. Tails, wind at their sails. There you go. That's a different cliche as opposed to that muddled nonsense. They're going to get sort of the wind in their sails, and they're going to be very, very difficult to deal with from a defensive point of view. But if you can get on them early, and if you can start frustrating them, moving them around, like this is where the Italians need to use every ounce of their clinicality if they can when they have the ball in the Irish half. It's about moving them from one side to the other, getting outside that initial blitz, putting pressure on those wide defenders. And if you're stymied, if it's a little slow and it's a little jagged, try and move around that pendulum and put a ball in behind. And I think it's on as the game goes on. Garbisi and Canna are going to have to become more aware of their own pack as well, in terms of how tired they're getting.
This is it.
Can they hit that many rucks, or is it time to just put the ball in behind? And I think those two are going to be crucial in terms of deciding how that goes. But in the early goings, it's all about moving them. It's all about attacking when you're in the Irish half. Varney driving a good tempo, probing those wide channels, looking to attack from deep. And as you say, if they get penalties early doors, maybe having it cut to the corner isn't the worst call this week. I know you always want them to do that.
I do.
This week,
not always. If they're playing Georgia, they should kick the threes.
But this week against Ireland, I don't rate Ireland's defence enough to think it's a bad play to try and go and score tries early doors, because I think that is a huge way you could win this game.
It's twofold reasoning with it, because Ireland are very incompetent looking when they're a couple of scores behind. They are not good chasers of a game. But what they are, even an out of form Ireland, once they get 1 or 2 scores ahead, they settle and they get comfortable, and they do, because they're such a possession based team, they're just very, very tough to play your way back in against. Couple that with the fact that Italy have, like, they gas at around 60 minutes. They're completely gassed, usually slightly before that. They don't have the fitness of the Irish or of most of the opposition they have. They have to kind of count on the fact that in the last 20 they're probably going to ship a couple of tries, because they usually do. So it really needs to be a priority for them, I think, to score 21 points, or at least 20 points, because they haven't done that yet in the tournament. They've got close with a couple of tries, but they haven't. And part of the reason they haven't is in the first half, when they have their energy about them and they're winning these penalties, they chip it over. Like, they kicked one to make it 8-all against England, and then conceded 2 unanswered tries, and it's like what did the 8-all do? Like, you have your energy to attack now, right now, and you're not going to have it in the second half of the game. So you need to make hay.
I think Franco Smith is trying to combat that second half fatigue with ingenuity in terms of substitutions, keeping some of his big men on the bench and bringing them on. You might see him do that with Sheriff Traore this week. Now that he's back.
That is all good tactics.
Or even at times, I think they started a guy, played him for 20 minutes, subbed him off, brought him back on for the last 20 minutes.
They've done that with props, which is also good tactics. And you do need to do what you can when you're at a fitness deficit, but you do also have to factor it in to your plan. Go, like, the last quarter is not going to go our way.
I do think they're going to have to be able to put together an 80-minute performance, and I think they know that. But I think definitely part of that is starting well and affecting that Irish confidence and momentum, and really getting them questioning themselves, and then putting the pressure on. They have a lovely offense, and Ireland have a weak defence. They should be very bullish about their capacity to get outside.
Exactly, should be looking for tries.
The problem is at ruck time, and with discipline around the ruck. Ireland have some incredible jacklers. They've got Tadhg Byrne in that back row, CJ Stander, really great over the ball. And if Italy can get a little slack at times with their carries, Garbisi getting romantic, moving forward, pods around the corner, and they just leave a carrier vulnerable. Which even in the build up to a couple of tries last week, you saw them do. There were a couple of carriers who were just vulnerable on the ball, and England didn't get it. I think if they do end up leaving themselves exposed in that way, they could be caught out. And you saw that against France. There was like great phase. We're into the 22, and then Aldridge comes in with a big steal, and it breaks the heart of them.
It does. And, breaks the back of them, and it's something that Ireland will target between the Standard, Tyburn. Like, much better. There's loads of guys. Even Kelleher, if he's to start, has a good poach game in him as well. There's a lot of danger all over in the tight. So if they can move them wide, if they can even offload out of the tackle area and keep that that kind of anti-ruck play, as you're going deck, keep it going. Certainly in the
Ireland
beginning,
don't like the pace. You saw it against France. As soon as their line is broken, if you keep offloading and they can't get back into their shape, they get frazzled and they're not right, and then they start missing tackles. Italy need to drive that tempo. As much as you can talk about their fitness being a suffering issue, their offense likes to run at a higher tempo.
It does. It needs to pay dividends. Even if it means it's going to fizzle out, like watching Tanya Latupo kind of barnstorm for 30 minutes and then have to be taken out of a game because he's a tight head prop. But it's like Italy need to barnstorm for the first 20 minutes. They need to race to probably a 21-0 lead and then hold on if they're going to win it at all. Otherwise, it's going to go as rote, and they might be 9-6 up or whatever, or 12-6 up, and then they'll slowly lose the game.
Maybe. I don't know if it's that simple, but I think there's definitely merit to what you're saying, and I definitely think they do need to attack this Irish team early doors for a rake of reasons.
And tempo is key to their attack.
And tempo is key, but I think defensively is where this is where they lose these games.
Just straight up tackling, and it's like at the beginning of the games, their first up tackling is pretty good. Certainly, as the game starts, you couldn't fault their gameness in the contact area, particularly the back row. But even the likes of Carlo Canna gets stuck in and punches above his weight at the early showing. What happens is, like, when they concede one, or when things don't go their way, or they fail to score a try, a big key turnover, they allow the errors to compound. And then they also just allow the heads to drop a little. You can see the body language shift, and it's not even to do with fatigue because it happens earlier. It's just like being disheartened, and they need to do something to combat it. And I know Franco Smith was painting a very frustrated figure when that exact thing happened in the French game, where they'd been really good for a long sequence, got turned over in slightly unfortunate circumstances, and then immediately gave away another penalty, and then another, and then into the corner, and then very softly conceded the try. And it was like Franco's just like this in the coaching booth, because no doubt they talked about it all week, not doing that, and then it transpires on the pitch again. Very frustrating for a coach to look at, but it's really is hurting them, and it's something you were noting, I think, as well. They're a little too soft to concede. Regardless,
too quick. I wouldn't say soft. I never say soft about a rugby team, but I think they're
quick. I suppose. Well, it's willing. It almost seems at times, compared to the ferocity it associated with like a French Sean Edwards led defense on their own goal line.
They need to almost enjoy that part of the game. What I will say though is that there's been that has been true for ad infinitum for years. And there is definite promise in how they've played so far in the competition. And this is a great game for a defence. I always say this, Ireland, like how many times in the last 6 months has a team come out of playing Ireland and gone, geez, that defence was brilliant. I can think of at least like 3 or 4 occasions. Wales in the round 1 of this week. Magnificent defence. You never heard the like of it. France, the same. Incredible defence. England, when we couldn't score against them in Twickenham. Because Ireland, they're a tough team, they're a physical team, it's a test. Don't get me wrong, it's a test.
Oh, if you fall off tackles, they'll score on you. Like Tyke Furlong could skittle a few guys and go through.
Furlong, Stander, James Ryan, these guys have looked unplayable at times in offence just with sheer power. And then on other occasions they haven't, and we'll get into this obviously when we're talking about Ireland, but they're very, very predictable. They make it very, very obvious who's going to get the ball, and they're not good. They're not great at exposing space out wide, so they tend to play in tight areas. And that is a defence's dream. You know exactly what you need to do. You need to come up in a hard, pressure defense on the inside and stick your tackles, stick them behind the game line, chop them low, make sure that they're not going to be looking for offloads. They only run to retain the ball. So jackal game is not as important as just making your tackles, keeping them behind the gain line, and forcing them to kick from the pocket as well. Yeah. Just kick it into the air from the pocket. At which point it becomes behind the back three. Like the other thing is that Ireland are under so much pressure. Like the media has been talking up a storm about Mike Catt can't do, the attack isn't doing this, and what's Mike Catt doing, and there's a bit of pressure on the team coming from the media.
With ball in hand.
Yeah,
that's another defence's dream. If they're a little bit clunky,
they haven't been great at it. Yeah. And if the Italian defence can stop that Irish pack, and it's a big if, it's the if of the game in terms of they need to not be blown away by the physicality of an Irish team that's going to be pumped and a little reactive to what's been said about them, and they're all great players, so they're still going to be able to deliver.
Yeah, you could. They look physical enough as well. They've been put on very physical showings in their first two games, despite losing them. Their forward pack have arguably edged the battle in both of them. They just haven't converted their chances.
I wouldn't overstate the toughness of the task either. Yeah. Like it's for Italy, it's a decisive step up from where they are. To stop this sort of rumbling physical entity that can and dynamic entity that can be the Irish pack. But they have to do it. Get out of the line, chop the tackles, don't give them an inch. And then if they do that, there is the possibility that Ireland... Now, cooler heads will probably prevail. With Sexton on the pitch, Ireland are probably just going to kick the bomb in the air, at which point it becomes about your back three, and that's important as well.
Big task, Andy, as well, yeah.
But if Ireland are feeling a little frisky and feeling like they have to show something, all of a sudden just an inside blitz, keep it super narrow, force them to throw those wide passes, get in their face. And listen, if they do it, they do it. But the chances are, watching Ireland in recent times, they haven't done it.
No.
And getting up in their faces, shooting in on the likes of Henshaw and Sexton on the inside.
Ring rows as well. I think the outer edge of your blitz is basically ring rows. You're blitzing in.
Just pressure. I mean, stay on side, obviously, but pressure blitz, because Ireland they're not moving the ball well, and you don't really need to mind the outside channels that much because they're not accessing them.
Yeah.
So I think from an Italian point of view, it's the funnest way to defend. You keep it narrow and you just get in their faces. Yeah. Attack from a defensive point of view. And listen, the dream picture, you talk about early 21-0s and where they come from. If this Italian defence can generate a score from stopping from stopping an Irish team from a turnover, I think that could be
a game winning play potentially. Certainly a part of their winning picture if they can get a defensive try cheap enough that will break the backs of Ireland's offensive thing, and then that'll force them even narrower. And it's a simple equation, but it is one that. It's tough to see them doing for 80 minutes because I feel like they will probably fall off a few of these tackles.
Yeah, and that's the thing is when you talk about bringing energy, it does take energy to do that.
Well, indeed, if you're talking about bringing zip when they have the ball in the first 20 and bringing a pressure blitz off the ball and making big hits on guys who are big monsters, and it can't just be your back row who do it.
No, it can't. But Canone's come in they have some talent in that pack. Granted, it's not as strong as the other packs.
Yeah,
they are favourites to lose for a reason. But if they can stymie the Irish attack, it's like. A lot of defences have looked good against this Irish attack. It's not a complex equation, put it that way.
No.
It's a physical one.
It is.
And that's the test that's going to be put to the Italian defence. And likewise, actually, in the set piece, the only other area we haven't touched on for the Italians, Ireland obviously have been very tough in the scrum so far. They might make a couple of changes, but bringing Tadhg Furlong in doesn't weaken them.
Their scrum. Their scrum has been a mighty force. Actually, it was putting on a good show against the French as well. A very well touted French scrum and a dangerous physical one.
Reasonably so. They're an excellent scrum.
They're a very good scrum, and then also the line out has been improved for Ireland as well. So it's key. It's a key area of ball for Italy. Yeah. A lot of their back row forwards do jump as well. They'll need to contest Ireland's ball, but they'll also just need to be mindful of securing their own because Ireland have shown a willingness. I think they stole 3 lineouts in the second round and 4 lineouts in the first round, so they need to be mindful of that first phase possession.
Getting dynamic and yet simple calls because Tadhg Furlong is going to be jumping after that ball every time. Milking a penalty or two often wouldn't be the worst thing, but they have to mind their set piece and lock it down. And obviously, as much as we can talk about winning pictures, a losing picture for them is like no maul defence, just being run over, penalties at the scrum, turnovers at the set piece, no platform, no launching for Garbisi, and all of a sudden it's a disaster. So if the pack can't stand up in that fundamental area, it's going to be a tough day for them as well.
For sure. But I suppose with that we will swing on to ourselves, Ireland, and their winning picture for this game. It's a curious position they're in. Obviously, 0 from 2 is not ideal, and it hasn't happened in quite a while. I don't think in the entire Six Nations history. I think it's 1998. I think
really?
was the last time
they never went 0-2
to start the tournament.
I remember in 2013 when they lost to Italy, they won the first game against Wales and didn't win any others.
Everyone else. Yeah.
Well, they actually had a couple of draws, I think.
Oh, that's right.
And then a defeat, a defeat as well to Italy randomly. Yeah. So yeah, it was just a weird.
No, there've been poor years in Ireland's history, but just hadn't started in 0-2 in the Six Nations era. But they have now, and yeah, it's a tough equation because it's the Italy game, but in some ways it's kind of nice to have a gap week, recompose yourself, and then go out and play Italy with all these questions in kind of in the melting pot. They know what they have to improve on. It seems likely that they're going to pick, obviously we had that leaked team, a relatively strong team to do it. They're not going to throw the likes of your Harry Burns or something in there to kind of sink or swim. They're going to stick with the kind of tried and true guys. What's interesting is just what will we see from them. Like, there's an obvious and standard approach that we've seen from them throughout, or as we were saying in Italy's things, will they feel the pressure to try and throw the ball around a bit more, and will we see that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, there's the game within a game. You know, they're playing Italy here. Andy Farrell knows. First of all, the first thing he knows is that Italy are not an undangerous side.
Yes.
That if they match Ireland, if Ireland are sluggish, they could be caught.
If Ireland don't score points, they can be caught.
Yeah, the other thing he knows is that, and whether this is fair or unfair, if he loses this game, the onslaught that's going to come his way from a media point of view, from a fan point of view, and the pressure that's going to be put on his job is enormous.
Yes.
And that is, one of those things that happens when you have a job in professional sport. It's
true.
I never done it, but I can't imagine it's the nicest feeling. No. And so Farrell is in this position where it's a real must-win game. Italy are dangerous, and yet there is this added element where they know they need to build on things. They know that the macro picture in terms of an Irish plan involves them doing well at a World Cup, winning a quarter-final, getting to a semi-final, becoming one of the top 4 teams in the world. And in order to do that with the stiff competition that's around, they're going to need to improve in a couple of key areas, mostly in terms of how they're using the ball. Yeah. They're going to need to look slicker in attack. They're going to need to have more ways to attack. They're not the biggest team. They're also not the quickest team, but they're bigger than some teams and quicker than others.
Yeah.
And they need to, have multiple ways to win games. They need to be
more adaptable than they are.
Yeah. So does this game present an opportunity to start working in a better attacking shape and a better attacking structure and moving the ball and changing the mindset such that you're attacking more and looking for more ways to score tries, running more support lines, looking to work some offloads, trying to see if you can run this Italian defence around and then building from there for the next game? Absolutely. The game does factor in. That is a huge chance for this game. But if I was being honest and I was analysing, how does Ireland beat Italy? How do they do it?
Usually by kicking the ball.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the early exchanges, you're going to kick the ball in the air, you're going to put them under huge pressure, you're going to set up red zone attacks from where you're going to smash them, you're going to be physical, you are going to improve your tempo, you are going to move with a bit more speed, hopefully you're going to work in a bit more shape where you have forward pods with a couple of men outside, so there's a bit of deception as to where the ball's going for, maybe a few tip-ons, but mostly what you're doing is running over them, keeping the ball quick, not giving the defence a chance to set, and winning all those collisions. So James Ryan's through the contact, Tadhg Furlong's through the contact, Kelleher's through the contact, and he's popped it off to Tadhg Byrne, and they're just in that way.
Yeah.
And I think if you're putting a plan together, that's kind of what you're doing. When you're getting penalties, you're kicking to the corner and you're working your maul. Paulie's in.
Yes,
he's been trying to get maul tries going from an Irish point of view. They need to be a bit more like the Welsh were the other week, where they're dynamic and very quick to turn the corner. Those kind of things need to be worked in, and so the idea that they're going to go out and start playing Harlem Globetrotter rugby,
that's not going to happen.
Maybe, but I think what's more likely is that they're going to play sort of a streetwise game where they are adding elements. They're adding mauls, they're adding a few little offloads around forward pods.
Yeah.
But the idea that they're going to just throw it wide and test the Welsh wide, the Italian wide defence.
We're going to see that quirky little scrum half loop play that we only ever see in the Italy game.
No, well, they have shown some capacity to do some first phase rugby, and obviously they have Sexton in there, which does improve the attack always.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really see. From a personnel point of view, I don't really see Henshaw and Ringrose going wild in the wide channels, picking lines off one another and starting to open teams up in attack.
Yeah.
And I actually think if they try that way, as I mentioned when we were looking at Italy, they could find themselves in a tough position. If Italy are up in their faces and they can't really execute, they could end up giving a ball away or being trapped behind the gain line. So I imagine they're going to try and play a composed physical, streetwise game plan where they negotiate their way to the right parts of the field, kick the corners, maul tries and red zone tries, improving the red zone offense and the maul and adding the maul try to the repertoire will likely be the two big work-ons as opposed to any globetrotter stuff.
Yes, I would agree with that in terms of the likely scenario. I would like to see more of it, just aggressive support lines being run. Yeah. We saw bits of it from Gibson Park, but he seemed to be the only one in the last couple of weeks running like very aggressive kind of forward tracking lines for to receive an offload.
Just run off the ball carrier. Yeah. It would make a massive impact because ball carriers are hustling on their feet and trying to stay up and trying to work a gap, and occasionally getting into position to get their hands free, but nobody's really running that killer support line, which is what opens up defences.
Indeed, yeah. So that would be a nice improvement, is just to see guys hitting lines in that way. I think that should be another work on as well, like the maul try thing. And that doesn't involve reinventing the wheel. It doesn't need to be Harlem Globetrotter stuff. The guys are hustling pretty well and winning collisions in the midfield anyway. And as you say, we've seen it a few times, like Ringrose or even Billy Burns on a few occasions, or a few of the tight forwards have managed to get an arm free on occasion and just looked up to see no one. Yeah. And it's like there's an offload there's just no one there to receive it. So hopefully there'll be someone there to receive it, because you could analyse that and hopefully make those slight adjustments.
Like they have the physicality over this Italian team.
They do,
working in a bit of shape, bit of deception as to where the ball is going, and playing with a little more offensive zip. But they're small changes, they're not big changes, and that's what Ireland will be hoping to implement.
And the big change is just to get back into winning ways is kind of key for them as well.
Yeah. The scrum is the other area where Ireland should be looking to attack.
They have been, yeah. You were bemoaning, actually, it was great. It's great to have Furlong back, to be honest, is one good thing. But even in the Autumn Nations Cup, we were looking at a relatively weak Irish scrum compared to the last kind of nearly 10 years.
Yeah, I would have said it in the preview of this competition. Actually, I was very, very surprised by the renaissance of Cian Healy in particular.
Yeah. But then obviously Kilcoyne returning to the fray has changed things as well. Come back from a long-term injury, and Ed Byrne in good form too, and now Tig and more battle-hardened Porter. It's just it's kind of night and day compared to the team that finished last year with a somewhat shaky scrum, holding it together against a very dangerous Scottish side in the last game, versus now a very aggressive scrum dominating the French.
Ian Henderson and James Ryan in at lock, and then you got a hefty guy in CJ at the base. He's adding his weight, and even Josh and Ty Byrne are no slouches as back row forwards. So it can be just a very physical, compact eight, and scrum really well. And just props winning their battles has been a great sign in early weeks. And I think we're getting Furlong back in there against an Italian scrum that is, well, as in most areas, probably the worst one in the Six Nations. Yeah. I think there's great scope to attack and win penalties that way, and just
get win the game, entries into the 22.
Win the game physically, and then work from there. Yeah. The other area obviously is defence, which we've talked about as well as being every bit as problematic as the offense. Yeah, there'll be sterner tests ahead for the defence, which is why I think a target for them is to try and keep Italy to no tries. It's tough task, and it's one that Ireland have not managed in recent years. Italy usually get a try, even in one-sided kind of shellackings. Italy usually find a try against Ireland. It should be a little mini task within a task, because they keep, as you say, having the ball for nearly 70% of the game, and yet conceding a few tries in the 30% or 40%. Simon Easterby, who was the forwards coach, has moved and become the defence coach, and Andy Farrell's obviously the head coach. He was a defence coach, so he's defensively minded. But some of the tries they're conceding are curious. I mean, they're trying to play this sort of, I guess they're trying to play this South African style.
Blitz, I guess.
Yeah, the blitzing. You saw with South Africa when they had that great defence at the World Cup that Am would blitz on the 13 channel, but actually often Mapimpi or Colby would come up with him on the outside, and just it became suffocating and extremely difficult to get to the outside of them. From an Irish point of view, teams get outside them so easy. Well, they have a narrow blitz on the inside, and then teams get outside of that, and we've seen the French do it. And then the pressure that you associate with those style of defences that comes from the 13 channel isn't there.
No.
Gary Ringrose isn't picking men out and charging at them and preventing them from getting passes away. It becomes, once it gets outside the 10 channel, it becomes static except for the wing, who's coming up super narrow, and then that just leaves space on the outside every time. Usually with the last passer of the ball having two defenders on him and the guy outside him unmarked. And so it's just it's kind of a baffling system. It's neither one thing nor the other.
No.
And then the other thing is that they're not doing it with any kind of discipline, because you saw I think it was the French game, the second try, Pinot's try, when they went left off a ruck and the blitz came up, and then the receiver had time to just move it to the right side of the ruck, and there was no blitz on the other side. So that's just the defence not doing its job. Yeah. And then easy try on the outside again as Lowe comes flying up and no one else does.
Yeah, far too soft. Lowe showing the wingers always get singled out for blame with those things, but it's a whole systems failure when there's no line speed and then a winger shooting out.
Shooters need to work in tandem. Otherwise, it's just a guy jumping.
The other factor is it's maybe not that prudent to have the 13 shoot be the key fulcrum. It should probably be a shoot from 12 to be the leader of it, because Gary Ringrose isn't Lethania Am. Lethania virtue it was commented on in the World Cup just how unusual South Africa's defensive system was, and the reason it was allowed to function as such is that Lethania Am is possibly the best defender in the back line in the world.
Yeah, he has a lot on him, and he's a sensational reader.
Yeah, and sensationally physical. It's not just Gary Ringrose is actually a pretty competent reader of a defence as well, but there's one major issue is that sometimes he'll make the perfect read and hit the man and fall off the man, and the man gets away.
Well, we haven't even seen that so far. We haven't really seen him making those leads, but I know what you could say. Henshaw is a class defender on his day.
Yeah.
Maybe there's scope for him to defend the 13 channel, but I just think you're either going to scrap that system entirely and play more of a drift style, sort of pushing up but also drifting and then hunting the ball in pods. As you know, I think they did a bit more under Andy Farrell prior to this season. But at the moment,
also
it's
relatively porous.
At the moment, it's a confusing mess of a system, because it seems to be this sort of South African system where you're going to be super aggressive off the line, but it's just not that aggressive off the line. They're very reactive. They're very slow. Once teams get in behind them, they look lost. And obviously we cited that issue off set pieces where just two centres and a winger go scurrying into one wing, and you've got a prop and a hooker and a scrum half on the other wing. And teams move it over there and beat their men one-on-one and score tries, and it's just been super easy for them. And if Ireland don't fix that, if Ireland don't, and it's a coaching issue as much as it's anything else, because I think they're all competent defenders, but the system is kind of a mess. The Italians will expose it. They are good enough to expose it. Of that I have no doubt.
No, it's a perfect, it's a tailor-made system for the Italian attacking system, which is kind of deep and wide. So there's definitely scope for danger here, and it's a huge test for them in terms of, can they keep a clean sheet? Similar to a goalkeeper's kind of mantra. Can they keep a clean sheet against what is a dangerous and bullish Italy team? I mean, it's a good test.
I guess no. I
don't think so.
I think it could be the losing of the game for them.
Possible. It's possible too, but hopefully they keep it down to at least only one try. But it could be 3.
It could be 3. Easily, it could be 3. I think this is a good game. I don't think this is a blowout.
Well, I think this is the best Italy game of the tournament, because Ireland are in such sluggish form. But that all being said, how do you see it going?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I don't. I could, obviously there's a picture where it's a blowout. We've run over. The Irish pack is brilliant at its best, and it's formidable. Tyke Furlong, James Ryan, Ian Henderson, CJ Stander, Tyke Byrne. On paper, those guys blow away the Italy pack, and maybe they do. But just on the forward pack is vital, and it is part of how you win games. But if you have a worse defense and a worse offense than your opposition, no matter how good your forward pack is, you could be in trouble. And while Italy's defense hasn't been good, there is a picture where they step up and start defending the Irish and don't get blown away physically, and then that becomes the telling factor, which is the sharper offense and which is the better defense.
And as we said at the start, it's 3 tries to 2 in terms of the tournament so far to Italy.
I'm not necessarily predicting an Italy win. I'm not predicting an Italy win. I don't think they're going to win. I don't think they're good enough, but I do think that it could be a ding-dong battle for about 60 minutes, and I do think that it'll only be maybe a 10-point win. I don't think it's going to be a blowout out in Rome.
Fair enough.
10-point win for Ireland.
10-point win for Ireland. I'm going to take the over on that one. I would suggest. I think it's probably going to be between 25 and 30 point margin. Maybe. Or maybe they only score 30 points themselves. It's kind of if France put 50 on them, I don't think Ireland are going to put 50 on them.
They might. England put 38 on them. A lot of it depends on Italy as well.
It does. Indeed. If Italy don't arrive at the pitch, then it could be any score. But I'm hoping to see more from Ireland, just from a selfish point of view. One thing I wouldn't have faulted even in the opening 2 weeks is just their gameness. I actually think more so than even last year, where there were a few question marks about just are they up, like particularly Twickenham performances where it's just they seem very passive. I didn't see that in the first 2 games. They're just not being clinical with their chances, but they're actually hustling their heart out, trying really, really hard a lot of the time, but just without shape. I feel like that, coupled with their overall quality and the fact that they need a win, will probably result in one, and quite a hefty one, I would think.
Okay, yeah, that's the optimistic take, and it's certainly possible.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, I suppose with that we will park that game and move on to the more juicy fixtures of the weekend.
Sure. Thank you for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and share with your friends. And if you'd like to hear more of what we have to say, please be sure to subscribe and click that bell so you get notified when we upload our videos. And please join the comment section as well. We like to get a fun conversation going here.